So in this video, I want to talk a bit about the RED DSMC2 Speedbooster mount that I'm creating and have been working on for quite a while. It's literally like over 2 years at this point. But that's not the only thing that I've been doing. I have been doing a Fusional MK2 RED DSMC mount, a Blackmagic B4 to RED DSMC2 and also DSMC1 Dragon adapter, some other kind of accessories, and also a mini mag reverse engineering project in collaboration with another guy called Chris. Very cool. That is almost done. But getting back to the DSMC2 Speedbooster, that has taken such a long time because there's been so many small parts to overcome and so many decisions that have just taken a lot of trial and error to kind of get to a point where I feel like, yeah, this is 100% the right way to be approaching this project. At least for myself, I don't want it to be a compromise in any way. Like, any way I can make it so it's as good as it possibly can be, I want it to be. So to get started, I think I'm going to talk about the virtual DSMC2 camera that I've got within my design software, which I'm quite pleased about this because it has taken quite a while. And I had to completely take apart a DSMC2 camera to get these measurements. So this is based upon a textured 3D model, but I've accurately rescaled it so that it is accurate to a DSMC2 body. And then the section under the mount, which is the most important part for me to have 100% critical, accurate dimensions of, is the OLPF mount. So you can see that here. So you can see, so everything that the original DSMC2 cameras come with, I've modeled perfectly within this design. So that has been incredibly handy. And actually, it does quite nicely lead me on to the next section, which is the optic choices. So on a blog post I did probably 8 months ago now, it did say about this design, and it did say that I was going to use a Metabones optic. I really worked hard to try and get this optic to work, but it just wasn't anywhere near as compatible enough without making basically some compromises to the optics placement. And that kind of defeats the object. So I have moved away from this Metabones optic to a Viltrox optic. And I'll try and explain why on this design. So this is the Viltrox optic. If I zoom you in, Metabones is on your left and the Viltrox is on your right. And you can see the Metabones is just ever so slightly bigger. The glass surface area is very similar. It is bigger on the Metabones, but they both do offer excellent full frame coverage. And to be honest, they offer about the same coverage on the DSMC2 bodies. The Metabones offered a tiny bit of a bigger projection, but it actually didn't really benefit any particular capture modes. Like the Viltrox covers all of the capture modes you'd require. I think on some of the super wide modes, the Metabones is better, but there were other compromises that would have had to be made to use the Metabones optic. So I'm going to show you one of them, which was the placement of the optic. So I've got it on my screen here. This is the Viltrox optic. And you can see that is exactly where it has to sit. And it can't interact with any of these components back here. So you can see that, that is such a tight fit. If I show you between here and here, I think it's 1.2. Yeah, 1.15 mil. That is our gap between these components here. And then it's about 0.5 on this one. Yeah, 0.55 on the actual lever. So that is a bit hard to visualize. So this is like a split view, but basically this part here locks. So if I turn that one on, this one off, that's the original OLPF mount. And you can see here, this component at the top, that rotates and locks in place to hold the OLPF holder in place. And you can see here that the Viltrox optic sits really nicely. So this is the Metabones optic. And you can see here, if I go right in, like how ridiculously close that is. It is interacting. So it's only ever so slight. I don't know if it'll even show me that with a minus figure. No, it doesn't. Does it? No. But they are interacting. And the worst one is right at the back here. You can see how much that is interacting. So for it to miss the lever, and it's not required to have that lever working. I did work out ways to get the LPF to hold in without it. It was always a compromise trying to use this optic. And to offer a reliable kind of pairing of the mount to the camera, I would have to move the optic a millimeter off center, just so I could guarantee that it would work and cover correctly on all, not cover correctly, but work correctly on all DSMC2 cameras. And I didn't want to do that because it compromises what that optic's intended for. So I have moved away from this to the Viltrox Optic, but realistically, there's no major difference between the two. The Metabones performs better on the very outer edges, so there's more of a fall off in terms of there's a sharpness fall off right on the edges of the Viltrox. But the one area that the Viltrox performs significantly better than the Metabones is flaring. So the Metabones has a lot of like lens flare suppression going on, whereas the Viltrox has less, which sounds weirdly counterintuitive, but it actually means the Viltrox flares really naturally. So when your lens flares, the Viltrox also naturally flares, whereas with the Metabones, you do get these kind of like purpley flares that don't always look very nice and can kind of counter the look of whatever lens you're kind of shooting with, whereas the Viltrox just has a very neutral, organic looking flare to it. And it's only very subtle on both, but that's something I actually really did like in the testing of the Viltrox. I think I'm going to talk about the biggest hurdle with the RED DSMC2 Speedbooster, and that was the EF mount board. So I've got a board here. This has been such a huge part of the problems when it comes to developing a Speedbooster mount that is not only Canon EF, but is electronic, can interface with the camera. So it was important for me to work out how to deal with this PCB. So if I show you now, this optic actually has to sit nearest damn it right in the middle of that. So if I, can you see that? Right in the middle of that board. And there is no way it'll pass through. There's absolutely no way. I've even looked at like a custom jig to cut into these boards, but it's not that easy. Even though it looks like on the top of the board, that is just about possible. These boards are constructed of multiple layers, and they have, I think it's 4 layers now on this board. And the reason I know that is because I sent quite a few of these boards off to a specialist company to completely reverse engineer them. So, and when I say completely reverse engineer, I mean I've now got schematics of this exact board. I will zoom you back in actually, because you can see it. I've got schematics of this board, and this board is compatible with every version of the Canon EF to RED DSMC mount. The only thing they changed on this board was the firmware revisions. They made some updates in terms of compatible lenses and things like that. So I had to get this reverse engineered. All the chips and every part on it, all the traces have had to be remapped out. And that was fairly expensive to get done, but it was an important step to make because it allows me to completely change the layout of this board. The other really cool part about that was it's not just the board that has to be reverse engineered. You can reverse engineer the board, but you have to decode the firmware. So something I have literally just received today. This is really important. So I need to get these soldered onto another board to verify that they're working. Those are the reverse engineered chips that I've got done. So these chips contain the reverse engineered firmware for that board. So there are some legal issues about this for R&D and development. That's absolutely fine. When I go on to sell these boards, there's a very specific way that I'll have to sell these mounts, and they will require a donor mount. So I have been buying RED Canon EF mounts, so I've got a big surplus of them at the moment. But anyone who wants the conversion kit done, they'll have to provide a donor mount, or I will have multiple that are pre-assembled, but they may get sold out pretty quickly. But with the donor mounts, I'll take them in. The EF mount boards that are on those, they will have to be destroyed, and essentially they'll be backed up or replaced with my boards. And this way we get around the fact that I'm not creating new hardware based upon RED's firmware. This is just a backup of their firmware, and the old board is being destroyed. That's the only way I've been told that I can legally do this. If anyone else has a better solution, that's good. But at the moment, that works absolutely fine because I require donor Canon EF mounts anyway. So what I'm going to show you now are the shared kind of components between the donor EF mount and the Speedbooster mount. So what I've done is I've stripped back some of the parts. You can still see the main body here. I'm actually going to turn that off because that isn't shared. But it just gives you a better idea of what you're looking at. So all these components from the original mount are going to be shared, which is just means that like all these kind of intricate machined parts, especially the Canon EF mount face, like this is made incredibly well to really, really fine tolerances. So being able to reuse that is really handy. And the EF mount connector. So again, it's another small PCB that doesn't need to be created. It's nice to be able to reuse parts like this where they are hard to get made. It's another cost saving that gets passed on to the final cost of the product. The other thing I couldn't do, like the locking ring, that is built to the same specifications as the original one, but it had to be thinner. So this is a replacement part. The other parts, if I turn on the front baffle, so this sits just in front of the optic. And what it does, it's just through testing. When I was doing the lens flare tests and stuff, and I found that you could put a baffle over, and this would work with any speed boosters on the market right now. But if you put a baffle like this over it, and you're shooting, I think, actually this covers up to 1:1. This covers all the ratios that the optic could cover anyway, but it just allows you to stop some kind of stray light from flaring on the optic. And this baffle will be coated in a optically matte black anodized coating, whereas the outside of the design is all going to be powder coated in a very similar way to the original one. And powder coating is great because it's super tough, super strong in terms of like wear and tear. So any kind of, as you kind of rotate the locking ring, any sort of like rubbing your hand will do against it. It's very good at not wearing through. Whereas anodized, it's much thinner, it can wear through. So this bit that is anodized and is a matte black, super fine anodized is right within the mount. It won't be exposed to finger touches and stuff like that. The next thing we've got, so let's have a look. We've got, let me swap this out. So I'm going to swap out the optic now for my optic. So this is still the Viltrox Optic, but the Viltrox Optics are going to be pressed into a worm gear. So the reason I've done this, and this feels like it's complete overkill, but it means that I can accurately calibrate all the optics. When you're doing it by hand, like usually within both Viltrox and Metabones, they would have machines that calibrate these optics, and it is really, really important that they are calibrated correctly. I don't have, to make that machine is not really an option. But what I can do is make a calibration machine within the mount itself. So I've created this worm gear. I don't think I've got the specs written down. I want to say it's like 40 inputs of this to every one full rotation. And every one rotation, the optic moves forward 1 mil. I've actually limited so it can only move forward 0.5 mil and back 0.5 mil. But even though these are so fine, these distances, that is more than enough to make sure that the lens is perfectly calibrated. So these will be calibrated with an FDC or FDC FENS calibration tool. So that's one that works with Canon EF mounts. So every single one is going to be calibrated on camera to be perfectly at the right, I want to say flange focal depth. It is kind of similar. I'm going to near that. It's at the right flange focal depth for that optic. Probably not the right term. But it means that it will perform incredibly well. So if you have any lenses with like floating rear elements, they can perform particularly bad if they're off calibration. Even by got like tenths of a millimeter, they can start to have really reduced performance. And also kind of wide angle lenses and things like that, they really benefit from having a very fine flange focal distance calibration. So that's where this all comes into play. And then if I turn on the main body, okay, so you can now see it's all starting to take form again. So this is the main body as it's looking like at the moment. There will probably be some revisions. This is just like a prototype. And I know actually this version I'm viewing right now, I've actually made some amends to the next part I'll be showing you, which is like the optic house. It's the bit that holds all the threads for the optic to kind of move back and forwards through. So I'll put that on now. But I have made some amends to this, but you get a rough idea. And then if I turn on the PCB, that's how the PCB kind of sits. You get an idea of how it all fits in there, and it is very, very tightly in there. And you can see how much the optic protrudes out the back of the mount. So there's been a lot to kind of figure out and work out, but I'm really pleased with the way this is looking. And I hope this video hasn't been too kind of rambly, and it's given you a bit of a better insight into like the progression of this mount and where it sits right now. As I know, I know because so many people contact me. I've had a message this morning, a message yesterday, I had a message 2 days ago. It's pretty much every day or every other day, I'm getting messages about this mount. And I totally get it because I want to use this mount as well. But you should be able to see that it is a thing that exists, well, virtually at the moment. But there'll be a new prototype coming through, probably like, I've sent off, it could be another 3 weeks until that prototype arrives. But there'll be some kind of content I'll put out about that because I'll actually be able to physically test it, shoot something proper other than just tests with my kind of half resin, half plastic versions that I use for prototyping at the moment. So thanks for watching this. I hope that makes sense and wasn't too ridiculously chaotic. And keep an eye on the channel. There'll be some updates, obviously, about the mini mags and stuff like that. And yeah, thanks for watching and thanks for your interest. And I'm really excited to kind of get this product out, as I think it'll be a really, really interesting tool for so many lenses, being able to shoot full frame, and not just that, like being able to shoot full frame on a camera like a Gemini at 4.5K is really, really cool, but also being able to shoot at the lower crop resolutions and still have a stop of extra light and extra resolving power from those lenses. It's just really cool. So yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next update.